So with the media queries, you're setting up a max width that you want these new rules to apply to. And these new rules fix the design that breaks from your old rules. Right? So the way that, if we go back to our browser here for a second, the way that when we get smaller than this, the text here starts to overlap because these are not changing at all. These are trying to stay their same size, and this is changing. Then that's what we need to try to fix. Okay, so we said 1308. Let me get back down there. So then you just really need to decide like how you want to fix it, right? In this instance, I think what I want to do is I want to, because I have captions that give me a pixel size, and because for the font, and because that's important for the style guide, I don't want to change how big this text is. Does that make sense? You don't want to change that. What you want to do is just rearrange it, right? So what we probably want to do is this overall group. Let me bring my code up here. Let's find the font family, sans serif. So this group here, I probably want to just take off flex, let them stack on top of each other, and then increase the width of columns. Like width is at 28%. I want to change it to like at least 50%. And that'll just let that stretch out. Okay. You can't change the HTML with a media query. You can only change the CSS. Okay. So any changes are constrained by the structure of the HTML as you've already written it. The only way you can change HTML is through jQuery by injecting new HTML into the document, and we're not going to do that at this point. Okay, we're just going to create some new rules for certain conditions using CSS. Okay, so I want to turn off. I know that like I just came up here and in the browser, I played around. I'm like, okay, that doesn't look bad. It stacks, just makes it a little long. So I know that I want to turn off flex, and then which will also turn off justify space between. And then I want to come down to the headers ID and change the width to be 50%. All right. So do the first thing. So I'm going to do div ID sans serif. Div ID sans serif. New condition. Or open up your declaration block. And I'm going to say display. Now it said display flex. And how you turn flex off, how you go back to the default display, is by first knowing what the default display setting is for a document, and that's inline. Inline is the default display setting for an HTML document. So we'll type display, inline, and that will just change it back to the default. Does that make sense? All right. That's the only rule that we are changing for that ID. So that's the only one that will change when it's under 1308 pixels wide. The other rules that we already have written, like the font family and the margin, those will stay the same. Okay, so if I refresh the page, see how there's a new rule down here now? So this one's activated, this one's now overwritten. Does that make sense? Because media queries take precedent because the condition is being met. It's less than or equal to 1308 pixels wide. Cool? Still clear? Okay. So the next one we said we were going to do is change the width of our headers so that our numbers are not down there. So just find the ID headers, and we're going to override width. So we'll just do div ID headers. Oops. And then we'll say width, and we'll go 50% or whatever, whatever you decide through playing around in the browser. Again, this is one of those instances where using your inspector in your browser is really, really useful. Okay? You can try stuff out and see, and just remember to take note of what you're changing. I tend to change maybe one or two things in the browser just to see how it looks, and then if I like it, go back to my code, make those changes permanent, jump back to my browser, play around a little bit more, etc., etc. Just sort of follow that loop. All right, refresh. Nice and wide. Now we could probably stand to make this wider too. This would be the other text section because we have a lot here. So let's kind of play around here. Let's see, what does it look like if we let it go to 100? I actually kind of like that. Stretches out, doesn't feel so narrow. And then it'll still sort of flow because that big body copy always flows really nicely. All right, so we're gonna change div other text width to be 100. So we'll come down, div ID other text width. Ooh, gosh, I keep hitting P. Width 100%. Refresh. There we go. Rad. I want a little bit more space here. So I'm going to find the sans serif grouping again, I think. Yep, sans serif grouping again. That's this one. I'm going to say margin, bottom, 2 rem. I'm just kind of guessing there. Oh, it's not pushing. Div ID, margin, bottom, 2 rem. Oh, 6. It was 6 rem. Why is it not pushing it down? Huh, I don't know why it's not pushing it down. We'll come back to that. That's really weird. It's not even crazy. You could try padding. That's so weird. Huh. There. It's being applied, but it's not showing up. Goofy. Something to do with how serif is set up, I think. All right, cool. So now we need to fix serif. We'll come back to that once we fix serif. So, all right, serif also needs to be fixed. So let's fix that. We're going to do kind of the same rules. So serif, we need to turn off flex. So I'll go div ID serif, display, oops, inline, fresh. Did that bring back my, no? It's really, really weird. Huh, I don't know, that's super weird. That's bugging me. It's bugging me a lot. Because there's the padding right there. Bizarre. Or is that font family padding? Oh, that is the font family padding. I don't know, anyway. All right. Header, we already changed because I was smart and used the same ID. And body, other text, we already changed because I was smart and used the same ID. Yay. Go me. This is what it's a little different. Because I had you guys do the method of exporting the group SVG. But the same sort of thing would apply here, where we're going to want to just turn off flex and have them stack, and then change the width of the icon, the div icons, div class icons, to be, I'd say, 100%. So you can see them stack like that. So section ID icons, or section icons, display inline, and then div class icons width 100%. That should fix most of the issues, except that now my colors are not right, my background colors. So if you wanted to be really crazy and obsessive, like I can be sometimes, come in and change that. So find, it's like whatever div this is, completed has a background color. So I would change completed's background color to be white and then add a background color to the error group here. It's like div ID completed, background color, FFF, and then div error background color, whatever the other background colors were. Icons, state. Oh, that's different. Here we go. This gray right here. Oops. All right, so come back, refresh. Of course, that's terrible, that red and that gray, which would make me rethink my grays entirely. But now at least they alternate, right? Okay, so other than that, that would pretty much fix that, because that's going to fix it. It's going to look pretty good up until... Actually, it's going to be fine. See how the icons are reflowing? When we get to phone sizes, so if we come back out, bring our inspector, there's generally on Firefox and Safari and Chrome, you can find this responsive design mode pretty easily. If you don't see the icon, it'll be up in like your develop menu or wherever. Click on that, and what that's going to do is it's going to give you this. Stock this to the right. It's going to give you this like little frame around your document that is the rough dimensions of a phone. This is iPhone 6, 7. Oh, speaking of, I just buzzed over here. Oh, it's my phone. You know, so it's going to show you whether or not your document is actually resized or responsive. So this stuff is responsive. When you get down to these sizes, you don't need this kind of margin. You need at most like 5%. Okay. So what you can do is you can grab, just grab your width here, 375, and just say something like, add another media query. So you can go media query, remember in parentheses, max width. I usually do something like 450. And then in here, we'll do our content. What was it? Content class, something like that. Yeah, class content, div class content. So div content, change my width to be 90%, because that'll give me a 5% on each side. Just makes it a little wider. As long as you're not touching the edges, you'll be fine. Okay. But then this is also where I would need to come in and fix this stuff. Like I would add media queries to fix my page name. It's an H1, so like the font size is gonna stay pretty stable. But I think at this point I could get away with dropping it down a little bit. I could go, like H1 ID. What is it? Yeah, H1. Say ID name, page name. Font size. Is it 8 rems? So let's kind of just test it out here. 6 rems is pretty good. Say 6 rems, and then I'd probably change my line height a little. Because right now it's default, so let's add a line here and say line height, and then we'll just play around with it. So try like 5 rems, make it a little tighter. If you make it less than what the font size is, it will get tighter. If you make it bigger than what the font size is, more than what the font size is, then you add more space. Okay, so like 5.5, 5.75, 5.75 is nice. So we'll go 5.75 rems. Refresh that. It's pretty good. I'm going to add some margin at the top. Three rem. Oops. Just to start. Push it down a little bit. That's maybe too much. There we go. So stuff like that. With my squares, because I have a lot of space here, I would probably need to find... So you can see that class is breaking. It's trying not to break it. It's trying to stay... The div class itself is trying to stay the right size, but my squares are breaking it. So my squares don't have a dimension that they're trying to stay. Now what are my actual square dimensions? Do I have a dimension for these? No. What did I set these up as? I'm trying to remember how I built those. All right. Where do you get your size from? Oh, I have them set as actual pixel dimensions, which is terrible. So we can actually set these a little differently if we want to have them resized. So this would be color box. And this is going to change it for all of them. So was it ID or class? Class. color box. We'll say width. Remember, these need to be this needs to be expressed in the same units in order to get a square. So we're going to go off of viewport width. Or we could just change it to smaller pixel dimensions. Like we could say something like, this is 180, we could go 100 pixels by 100 pixels. And I'll get squares that big, which is a little better. These are still a little too big. We'll have to change those too. But does that make sense? Like what's happening here? Could try 150. 150. 150 is pretty good. Yeah. If you do want it to look, if you want it to look the same as, like, if you want it to be super clean, you can figure out the math for that, but it's probably easier to just add, well, the 150 doesn't work for these guys, so remember, you can't add any new HTML. So 100 is probably good. So we'll say 100. 100. And then let's find out what these guys are. Status box. So we'll say div dot status. Was it? I didn't even look to see if it was an ID. Div ID, div class status box. Okay, good. Their width is 125. What does it look like when we change it to 100? Oops. Still not enough, so let's go 80 pixels. Still not enough. One thing you could do, actually, that would look pretty good is go change their width to be the same thing. The width and height to be the same thing as the other boxes. So 100 pixels, height. Can't spell today. And we know flex is on them because they're going horizontally, so what we can do is say flex wrap. And what this will do is if if the dimensions of those, if the overall dimension of the contents of that container are wider than the allowed space of the wider than the dimension of the parent, it will drop it down to another line. Just pushes it to another line. Does that make sense, everybody? So just add that, and then when we refresh, it didn't do it because I didn't give their parent, which is color group, I didn't give it a width. So now I also need to give color group a width. So we'll say, is it a class? Yeah, div, class color group, say width, be 100% of your parent. And that didn't work because parent has a width. Why did this not work? I have flex turned on. Oh, because, I'm sorry, color group needs flex wrap, not status box. That's my bad. Parent needs flex wrap turned on. There we go. Then it does that, and then one thing I would do is, I guess, then on status box, add like padding bottom 1 rem. Ooh, never mind. Margin, not padding. Ah, yikes. Not on that. Find whatever that parent is for the caption. Oh, class colors. That's what we want. So then, yeah. Div class colors. Lots of little things to change, guys. Margin, bottom, 1 rem. There we go. Just makes a little bit more space there. So, okay, so here's the thing. Now that we have this at a good phone size, if I start making this wider, you can see how it changed back, right? See how everything's, those little points where it pops like that? Those are those breakpoints. That's when the media query is being satisfied. All right. So if I get wide and I get up to 13, actually, let's look at our. I don't know why it's not letting me scroll. I don't know. I don't know. It's not letting me scroll. All right. Well, if we get, I gotta rule it up. So if we start to get to that point, it should, let's find our text here. See, it should, there's another place where it just fixes itself. And that's a breakpoint. That's where our style has to change in order to look okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Okay. All right. If you don't like this stacking like it did here, you could apply flex wrap to that as well. And it will then, with the flex wrap applied, because really it shouldn't get to this point. We should never let it get to there because that breaks. So really it's 1565 is where it breaks. The body text should come down to the bottom, and these should take up that 50%. That's just a little more involved. You just have some different rules to put in up here where we added those rules. So you can do that if you want. It's all about how you want your design to change as the browser changes. Because remember, we need to keep the integrity of the font size in the typography, because those fonts can't get smaller or bigger. If you were just designing a website where it didn't matter, like what mattered, the relative size of elements, like the important stuff, your primary level, your biggest, your secondary level, down, body copy, whatever. Then you could set relative sizes for your fonts based off viewport width, percentage viewport width. And then it would just automatically change. The text would scale down, design proportion. That was intact. But we want the font to be always 80. We want for the primary font, the secondary, or whatever you chose, right? That has to stay the same. So use mediaqueries. Okay. Okay. All right.